Before proceeding, viewers are advised to exercise caution. The following is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is a verbatim reproduction of testimony in federal court in the case of Sean Diddy Combs, as reported by Inner City Press. The courtroom was in a state of shock. No one moved a muscle when Keanu Reeves entered the room. Everyone just sat there trying to figure out, is that really him? Yes, it was him. No bodyguards, no fuss, no usual Hollywood pomp and circumstance. He just walked in, sat down, and started talking. And that's when the strangest thing happened. He didn't read from a piece of paper. He didn't recite a prepared speech with the right accents and pauses. He spoke as if it had all happened yesterday. He spoke directly, calmly, without emotion. This made his story seem even more real and even more frightening. He began with a dinner in 2014. According to him, everything seemed pretty standard. A meeting at Diddy's mansion, a luxurious table, dim lighting, an atmosphere that was a little too polite. Keanu thought it was just one of those evenings when you're being talked into another strange but potentially lucrative role. It had happened more than once in his career, but at some point the dinner took a sharp turn. Diddy started talking about a unique project in which Keanu would play himself, but deeper. It already sounded suspicious. There was no script. There wasn't even a working title. Keanu asked who the director was. Diddy smiled and said that life itself will direct the film. Several alarm bells should have gone off at this point, but Reeves was still trying to see it as a strange but creative idea. Then Combs showed him the contract. The paper looked strange, unofficial, but deliberately pretentious, with flourishes, symbols, and some kind of allusion to the occult. Keanu said that the document contained almost no specifics. No fee, no deadlines, no rights. Just phrases like initiated, entered the circle, and began the journey. It was starting to resemble something cult-like. But the real point of no return came later when Diddy took him into another room and, according to Keanu, showed him a bathtub. It looked normal at first glance, only he was already bathing in it. The water was warm and murky, and then Combs calmly, with complete confidence in his voice, suggested that Reeves take a bath in it. "This will be your initiation," he said. "After that, you will become part of something much bigger." Keanu at first thought it was a prank. After all, he was an outrageous artist with a strange sense of humor, maybe just testing his reaction. But the longer he remained silent, the more serious Combs became. He started talking about transformation, about spiritual connection, about how everyone who has achieved real success has gone through this ritual. Reeves didn't get into the bathtub. He got up, thanked him for dinner, and left. He didn't say anything about it at the time. There was no point, no proof, no context. Just a vague feeling that he had almost gotten himself into some very dark and very strange situation disguised as an art project. And now, years later, he talked about it in court. Not because he wanted attention, but because, in his words, he realized that the bathtub was just the beginning. And there were many more dinners, contracts, and rituals than he could have imagined at the time. Keanu described how it all started innocently enough. He was invited to dinner. No agents, no managers, just a creative meeting. They said it would be intimate, nothing official. He didn't immediately understand what kind of event it was, but at the time, it didn't raise any red flags. The invitation looked like one of those events where actors, directors, and musicians gather to discuss abstract ideas and drink expensive wine, pretending that they are reinventing art. But this evening quickly went beyond even the most eccentric bohemian gathering. The dinner was held in a mansion in Malibu. Keanu immediately noticed that there were almost no security guards, no cameras, no waiters, or random guests. There was only one security guard at the entrance, and he took his phone with such composure as if it were written in the Constitution. Inside, it was dimly lit with candles and strange smells, like a mixture of aromatic oils and something he couldn't identify. The music was muted, coming from somewhere in the walls, as if even the speakers didn't want to reveal themselves. The atmosphere was not just intimate, but almost mysterious. Diddy was standing at the table. The table was set for two. The food looked deliberately neat, like in a commercial. Minimal dishes, maximum symbolism. It looked more like an altar than a place for dinner. And according to Keanu, it immediately confused him. The conversation took an unexpected turn. There was no discussion of movies, actors, or plans for projects. Instead, Diddy began to speak in riddles. He talked about power, but not political or business power, but some kind of supernatural power. He talked about secrets, but not gossip, but things that are not spoken aloud. He talked about legacy in a tone that suggested he wasn't referring to cultural contributions, but rather some kind of eternal symbolic status. Then the conversation turned to the project, but there was no name, no script, not even a rough draft, just an idea. He called it something bigger, a project that would supposedly change not only cinema, but the very personality of the participant. Keanu was supposed to, in essence, take off his mask, abandon his former self and become someone new, someone true. It wasn't an offer. It was almost a call to arms. It was as if he was being offered not a role, but participation in some kind of transformation where the usual rules didn't apply. At that moment, Keanu admitted, he began to feel that something was very wrong. The dinner gradually turned not into a meeting, but into something more like a ritual. Keanu said that it all started quite mundane, like a normal social invitation to dinner. No agents, no prying eyes, just creative people. He was asked to come alone. The meeting place was a mansion in Malibu. At the entrance, he was met by a single security guard who silently took his phone without explaining why. The house was dark, lit only by candles. Music was playing softly somewhere within the walls. Everything looked too staged, as if he had stumbled onto the set of some esoteric drama rather than someone's home. Diddy was standing at the table. The table was set for two, and everything about it resembled a ritual rather than a dinner. At first, the conversation was vague, but it quickly became clear that this was not a business meeting. Diddy wasn't talking about movies, roles, or careers. He was talking about power, secrets, and some kind of legacy. He hinted at a project that was supposedly outside of Hollywood. This project had no name, no script, and no team. According to him, it was supposed to be something more, a process of redefining oneself. Keanu listened, not understanding whether it was a joke, a philosophical sketch, or serious. Then the conditions became much more specific. Diddy calmly stated, "No agents, no press, only complete obedience." After that, he handed Keanu a folder. Inside, there was nothing that you would normally find in such cases. No script, no logos, not even a project name. Just one document titled Loyalty Agreement. 7 points. Keanu didn't remember the exact wording of each one, but overall, they sounded like a set of requirements for joining some kind of secret society. Recognition of the mentor's power, complete silence, mandatory ablution in holy water, belief in the process, renunciation of one's old identity, acceptance of a certain symbol, and the final point, eternal loyalty. Keanu tried to understand what it all meant, to which Diddy began to speak even more vaguely, but without any hint of a joke. At one point, he placed a black stone on the table, smooth and strangely shiny. He said that Keanu should take it with him to the bathroom after Diddy himself had finished bathing. He said that water preserves memory, and if Keanu really wanted to become part of the legacy, he had to undergo a purification ritual. And then, Keanu understood everything. This wasn't a project, it wasn't art, it wasn't symbolism. It was something else, something frightening and real. He thanked him for dinner, got up, and left without taking the stone or the agreement. And as he himself admitted in court, he is still not sure whether that evening was an invitation, a warning, or something he miraculously escaped at the last minute. The courtroom fell silent as if someone had turned off all the sound in the room. Keanu Reeves said that at that moment he was simply in complete shock. Imagine Diddy, a man who is used to being in control, speaking so calmly, so confidently, as if it were a normal business conversation and not something from the realm of mysticism or cult rituals. Not a hint of a joke, not a smile, nothing to lighten the mood. Just a clear, calm statement of terms and expectations. For Keanu, it was so unexpected and frightening that he couldn't respond. He just got up and left without saying a word. He never returned to those dinners and refused any contact with Diddy and his entourage. But here's what happened next. His career began to rapidly decline. Roles that had previously seemed secure began to disappear. Producers he had worked with without any problem suddenly stopped contacting him. The projects he was involved in were shut down without explanation or warning. It seemed as if someone somewhere had pressed a button and everything around him began to fall apart. Keanu tried to close this chapter of his life, chalk it up to a strange and incomprehensible dinner, forget about it, and move on. But just a couple of days after that night, anonymous calls started coming in. Calls in which no one spoke, only heavy, intermittent breathing could be heard, as if someone was deliberately trying to scare him. Then, suspicious cars began to appear near his house. They had no license plates and tinted windows, and they would park nearby and disappear as quietly as they had appeared. There was nothing concrete he could do. There was no evidence. The scariest moment came when he found a black envelope under the windshield wiper of his car one morning. It contained a short but very harsh message. Unfinished rituals have consequences. This made Keanu feel that the situation was spiraling out of control. No one explained who had left the note or why it was addressed to him. When he shared all this with his agent, he tried to reassure him. If you didn't sign anything, didn't agree to anything, just forget about it and move on. But then the agent added a phrase that explained a lot, and at the same time was alarming. There are people who don't like to hear no. This phrase seemed to imply that refusal was not just a choice, but a potential challenge that could cost him dearly. And according to Keanu, it was this thought that haunted him. He realized that he was facing something much more serious than just a strange offer or misunderstanding. After that mysterious dinner with Diddy, Keanu's life began to unfold like a scary movie. At first, everything went almost unnoticed, but then events took an unpleasant turn. One after another, projects he was supposed to participate in began to fall through. The first alarming news came when a shoot that Keanu was confident and agreed to participate in was unexpectedly canceled. Then, as if blow after blow, something even worse happened. He was simply cut from the sequel to a major franchise, without warning, without explanation. He was shocked because everything had been going smoothly with this project, and even the director, with whom Keanu had a good relationship, later admitted, "I don't know what exactly you rejected, but you scared the right people." This phrase sounded like a sentence, like an explanation of what was happening, but in itself only added uncertainty and fear. Over time, Keanu began to notice a disturbing pattern. Something more than just random coincidences was happening around him. He realized that dinner with Diddy was not just a meeting with an influential person, not a business conversation, not a normal invitation. It was a test, a trial, a kind of ritual that divided people into two categories: those who agreed to accept the terms and those who refused. And the results of this choice were diametrically opposed. Those who agreed seemed to soar to the top of success. Their careers flourished, and opportunities opened up as if by themselves. Those who said no seemed to disappear from the industry's radar, pushed out, erased as if they had never existed. Keanu began to understand that he had entered a game with very strict and secret rules, where refusal meant not just no, but exclusion from the system, loss of support and protection. One day, at a charity event, when Keanu had almost come to terms with what was happening, an actress he had worked with before approached him. She leaned in so close that he could feel her breath and whispered, "You said no, didn't you?" And then quickly stepped back and disappeared into the crowd. It was like confirmation of his worst fears. She didn't explain, didn't ask any questions. She just quietly confirmed what he already knew intuitively. Dinner with Diddy wasn't just a business event, but a kind of ticket to a closed club with very strict rules. Keanu refused, and for that refusal, he was literally kicked out of the game, made invisible, and denied any chance of returning. When Keanu began to tell his truth in court, he recalled one vivid moment from his career that perfectly illustrates what happened to him after he turned down the offer. He was at an important presentation, the very moment when the fate of a project is decided, and everyone is waiting tensely for the management's decision. In the middle of his speech, when he was almost at the main point, something strange happened. The manager, the person who was supposed to make the final decision, suddenly picked up his phone and started talking. The room fell silent. Everyone looked at him, but no explanation followed. When the conversation ended, the manager simply stood up, said briefly, "I'm sorry, but we'll have to reschedule the meeting," and left the room without any explanation. And after that moment, everything changed. Keanu was no longer invited to meetings. No one contacted him. All the doors that had previously been opened seemed to have slammed shut. In court, he commented on the situation as follows: "It's not that I was blacklisted. I was simply destroyed, quietly, without a fuss, no posters. Effective. It wasn't just being kicked out of the game, it was a soft, almost imperceptible but deadly career block, when you're not declared an enemy, but simply made invisible and unnecessary." One of the most impressive and disturbing moments in Keanu's testimony was about that dinner with Diddy. He described it as not a normal conversation between colleagues or a friendly meeting. It was something much darker and more sinister. Keanu said that Diddy talked about various actors, seemingly praising their achievements, but behind those words were subtle but clear threats. There were no direct accusations or open warnings, just hints that sounded much scarier. Diddy gave examples. He rose quickly because he was loyal. He got in the bathtub, he said, referring to one of the actors who allegedly went through the ritual. Then he added a phrase that made your hair stand on end. You're not going to get billion-dollar roles by staying dry. In other words, if you don't go through this ritual, you won't be part of their circle, and you won't have much success in the movies. At first, Keanu thought it was some kind of metaphor, a figure of speech. But Diddy was completely serious, without a hint of irony or humor. Those who did it are silent. That's why they have everything, he said, looking straight at Keanu, as if warning him that silence is the key to success and safety. In court, Keanu did not name names, but he made it clear that among those Diddy was referring to were some really big names. True global stars, people who had seemingly shot to fame and become industry leaders in a matter of years. Keanu admitted that at first he found it hard to believe. But as he watched the careers of some of the people sitting at the table skyrocket while he and others were simply written out of projects and shoots, he began to see the whole picture. Everything began to fit together like a grim puzzle, where success was not just talent or hard work, part of some darker, hidden ritual. This episode, which Keanu recounted in court, really struck everyone present with its dark atmosphere and mysterious undertones. Keanu recalled how Diddy talked about an actor who had just landed the lead role in a superhero movie, a blockbuster that was expected to gross billions at the box office. And then Diddy said something strange, seemingly joking, but actually sinister. You know why he's in a suit? Because he got wet in 2 minutes. That was enough. After these words, a deathly silence fell over the courtroom. Some of the jurors looked stunned, as if they couldn't believe their ears. The prosecution also froze, realizing that this was not just empty gossip, but a real system. Hidden, mysterious, and terrifying. Keanu was talking about a mechanism that operates in the shadows, deciding the fate and careers of actors not on set or in scripts, but somewhere deep behind the scenes out of the public eye. After that strange dinner and the inexplicable setbacks in his career, Keanu received another strange invitation. This time there was no pomp and circumstance or official letters, just a short message through a mutual acquaintance. If you want to understand the system, come and see the vault. Keanu was curious, and despite all his fears, he decided to agree, hoping that it was just some kind of prank or strange joke. He asked for the meeting to take place on neutral ground. He didn't want to find himself in someone else's game without being able to control the situation. However, instead of a cozy cafe or office, he was taken to a penthouse in Beverly Hills. The place resembled not a residential apartment, but rather something like a secret command center. There were no windows or familiar home comforts, only dark walls, hundreds of screens displaying various images and data, the hum of equipment, and absolute silence. In this place, it seemed that his every move was being closely watched, every word recorded, every movement. It was like being inside the brain of a system that no one usually knows about, in the very kitchen, where destinies are decided, where everything is controlled and managed, but where no one wants to be seen. Keanu, it was a shock. He saw with his own eyes how deep and vast this game was, and he realized that giving it up meant not just losing a few roles, but being erased from the entire industry as if he had never been there. Keanu described this moment in detail, as if he were reliving it. He said that in the penthouse where he was taken, there was a separate office with these massive boxes, large, wooden, with inscriptions and combination locks. Keanu didn't try to open them because he immediately sensed that they contained something very serious and dangerous. He realized that these weren't just documents, but actual files on the most influential people in the industry, videos with compromising moments, contracts with harsh terms, non-disclosure agreements, and possibly even evidence of blackmail. All of this was hidden and carefully guarded like a secret weapon that could destroy any career. Diddy calmly and emotionlessly explained to Keanu that if he agreed to go through the ritual and get in the tub, he would also get his own box, his own business, his own place in the system. It was a kind of insurance, guaranteeing safety and advancement. But after his refusal, everything became possible, meaning that Keanu could now become a victim of this system. Diddy added that it was not necessary to speak. It was enough to remain silent and attend the meetings. "We will record your silence," he said. Keanu, it sounded like a threat, and at the same time, a rule of the game. Silence was the new form of loyalty expected of everyone involved. And this silence could be a much more powerful tool than any words or confessions. When Keanu politely but firmly refused to participate, he felt Diddy's tense gaze on him. As Keanu left, Diddy called after him. "Silence is loyalty. Don't forget that." Those words seemed to cement an invisible chain that now bound Keanu to the system, even in spite of his refusal. In court, Keanu admitted that this moment was a turning point for him. He could have spoken out earlier, especially when he heard about other people who suddenly disappeared from the screen and from life. Something always stopped him. Sometimes it was a subtle hint that was hard to ignore. Sometimes it was a strange phone call in the middle of the night that made his blood run cold. Sometimes it was just the fear that no one would believe him and that he would be accused of paranoia or fantasy. That's why he kept quiet for so long. But now he had decided to reveal the truth, no matter how difficult it might be. Keanu recounted in detail how the turning point came in court. He saw Cassie Ventura, one of those who had also been drawn into this dark story, sitting in the gallery, unable to hold back her tears. Her reaction showed him that he was not alone. Those who had previously remained silent were now also beginning to open up. The judges, jurors, and spectators heard audio recordings and detailed descriptions of rituals that matched Keanu's own experiences with surprising accuracy. This was not a fragmented story. It was part of a large, carefully thought-out system that permeated the entire industry. Keanu remembered how in 2020, he received a message from an actor he knew, someone he had worked with before. The message said, "Now is your chance. If you decide to speak out, I'll be on your side." At the time, Keanu didn't respond and even deleted the message. It wasn't because he didn't trust his friend. On the contrary, he appreciated the support. It was just that he was afraid. Afraid of what might happen if he decided to stand up against a system that controlled everything and everyone so carefully. Afraid of losing everything he had and not getting any protection. But when the court summons arrived, everything changed. Keanu realized that this was not just a stroke of fate, but an opportunity. Opportunity to tell the truth out loud, to show the full depth and scale of what was happening. He realized that he could no longer remain silent, even if it was scary. This was his chance not only to defend himself, also to expose the system that was destroying the lives of so many. "This isn't revenge," Keanu told the judges and jury. "I just want everything to be clear. I want the truth to come out before I leave this industry for good." Keanu finished his speech. The atmosphere in the courtroom changed dramatically. The defense attorneys lost their confidence, as if they had lost their footing. Hollywood stars who had come to listen out of curiosity stopped smiling and whispering to each other. It became quiet and heavy. One of the jurors, a middle-aged man, quietly wiped away a tear, while another juror, a young woman, feverishly wrote down every word. The courtroom seemed to freeze, feeling the weight of what had been said. Keanu wasn't just telling a story. He was challenging the entire system, creating a wave that could no longer be ignored. Keanu's last words rang out in the courtroom like a whip, clear, heavy, leaving no room for doubt. He said, "The only reason I'm still here is because I said no. The only reason I said no is because I still believe there is a line." Eyes slowly met those of Diddy, who sat across from him almost hunched over, head down, jaw clenched, and lip bitten. His entire posture radiated tension and inner struggle, as if he understood the gravity and magnitude of what had been said. He said that legacy has value, but I'd rather be forgotten than be known for swimming in your shadow. The moment was like a thunderclap. The courtroom fell so silent that you could hear someone walking into the hallway. Suddenly, the judge announced a recess. This caused an explosion of activity. Journalists rushed out of the courtroom like bullets, rushing into the corridors to immediately share this event with the world. Illustrators, armed with notebooks and pencils, began busily sketching scenes and faces to preserve this historic moment on paper. Lawyers darted from corner to corner, trying desperately to find a way to mitigate the damage. They asked for Keanu's words to be removed from the transcript, challenged the evidence, tried to twist the meaning, but the judge didn't give them the slightest chance. His head shook from side to side and his voice was firm and unyielding. No exceptions, no amendments. Everything stays in the case. Meanwhile, the jury sat as if in a daze. They didn't move, their eyes fixed on Keanu. They seemed to be trying to comprehend what they had heard, to think about every word. Their faces reflected a mixture of shock, confusion, and deep seriousness. This was not just another story, but an encounter with a truth that shattered their preconceptions about the film industry and the power within it. This moment was not just another page in a trial, it was an accusation, powerful and open. An accusation not only against one person, but against the entire system. A whole culture of silence and submission that had kept the most influential people in check for years. Keanu challenged those who were used to their actions remaining in the shadows, those who thought that everything could be hidden behind masks of success and power. This moment marked the beginning of the end for this dark game, because now the truth was out in the open and there was no hiding from it.